I stood on my parents' front porch with 3 exhausted children behind me, one overstuffed trash bag at my feet and nowhere else to go. My father opened the door. He looked at me. He looked at my children. Then he said 7 words that changed my life forever. You made your choice. Live with it. Behind him, my younger brother laughed. My sister folded her arms and said, maybe if you'd forgiven your husband, none of this would have happened. My 4-year-old started crying. My oldest daughter squeezed my hand so tightly her tiny fingers hurt. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't scream. I simply picked up the garbage bag, turned around, and whispered 3 words so quietly that only I could hear them. Watch me rise. 18 months later, those same people were standing at my front door. My name is Abigail Harper, and 18 months earlier my life looked perfectly ordinary. Not perfect, just stable. I lived in a quiet suburb outside Indianapolis, where every street looked almost identical and everyone waved politely while secretly knowing everyone else's business. My husband, Ethan, worked as a regional sales manager for a transportation company. Good income, long hours, frequent travel. The kind of job that sounded impressive enough to excuse almost everything. We'd been married for 11 years. Long enough that I no longer remembered what life had felt like before him. That's something nobody tells you about marriage. You don't lose yourself all at once. You disappear a little at a time. One compromise, one excuse, one apology, until one morning you wake up and realize you've been living someone else's version of your life. We had 3 children. Olivia was 10. Thoughtful, careful, the kind of child who apologized when someone else bumped into her. Mason was 7. Loud enough to fill an entire house with questions before breakfast. And Noah, my youngest, had just turned 4. He still believed monsters lived in closets and that I could scare them away simply by kissing his forehead. I never corrected him. Every child deserves to believe their mother can fix impossible things. I worked part-time as a medical records coordinator at St. Vincent Medical Center. Nothing glamorous, but steady, reliable, flexible enough that I could still handle school pickups, dentist appointments, soccer practices, birthday parties, homework, grocery shopping, and every invisible task that keeps a family running. Ethan used to joke that I was our household's chief operating officer. People laughed. So did I. Looking back, it wasn't really a joke. The warning signs had been there for years. I simply became skilled at explaining them away. Business trips became longer. Phone calls became shorter. He smiled less at home than he did while texting someone else. Every conversation somehow ended with me apologizing for asking perfectly reasonable questions. He never yelled. That would have been easier. Instead, he mastered disappointment, the kind that quietly convinced you every problem somehow belonged to you. One Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. I'd come home early because Mason's teacher had called. Nothing serious, just a stomach ache. Ethan wasn't supposed to be home until evening. His phone sat charging on the kitchen island. Normally I never touched it. Trust had never been our issue. At least, I thought it hadn't. The screen lit up. A message appeared before I could look away. I can't stop thinking about last night. I miss waking up beside you already. No name, just a heart. For a few seconds, I honestly thought it had been sent to the wrong person. Then another message appeared. Did she suspect anything? My hand stopped moving. The room became strangely quiet. Even the refrigerator seemed to disappear. I picked up the phone, scrolled, and in less than 1 minute, 11 years of marriage ended. Her name was Vanessa. She worked for one of Ethan's largest clients. The affair had lasted nearly 14 months. Business trips, hotel reservations, photos, messages, plans, jokes about me. There was even one message that simply said, "She still thinks I'm working late," followed by 3 laughing emojis. I don't remember sitting down. I only remember suddenly finding myself on the kitchen floor. When Ethan came home that evening, I was waiting. His phone rested on the dining table. He looked at it, then at me. His face changed instantly. There was no denial, no confusion, no pretending, only silence. Finally he sighed. "I guess you know." Those 4 words hurt more than any confession. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I made a terrible mistake." Just, "I guess you know." For several weeks we tried. Counseling, long conversations, promises, apologies, tears. But something inside me had already broken. Trust isn't glass. Glass can sometimes be repaired. Trust, once shattered, never fits together the same way again. By early spring, I filed for divorce. I believed the hardest part was behind me. I couldn't have been more wrong. Because losing my husband wasn't the deepest betrayal. That came when I called my mother. "Mom," I whispered after explaining everything. "I just need somewhere safe for a few weeks." Silence, long enough to feel dangerous. Finally, she spoke. "Abby, I think you're making this harder than it has to be." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Men make mistakes." I actually thought I'd misheard her. "He cheated on me." "I know. You've seen the messages." "I have." "And?" Another pause. "You have 3 children." "I know I do. They deserve a father. They deserve honesty." She sighed. "You should think very carefully before destroying your family." Destroying. Apparently, the affair hadn't destroyed anything. Leaving it had. I stared out the kitchen window. Rain tapped softly against the glass. "Mom, I just need somewhere to stay until the court figures things out. Our house really isn't available right now." I closed my eyes. My parents owned a 4-bedroom home. My younger brother still lived there. 2 bedrooms sat completely empty. There was a finished basement with its own bathroom. There was room. Plenty of it. She simply didn't want to give it to me. The next morning, I packed 1 large trash bag with clothes, loaded 3 children into my aging minivan, and drove to the house where I'd grown up. I honestly believed, once my parents saw us standing there, everything would change. I had no idea that the worst betrayal of my life was only minutes away. The drive to my parents' house took just 20 minutes. I had made that trip hundreds of times over the years. Sunday dinners, Christmas mornings, birthday parties, emergency babysitting. Whenever someone in the family needed help, my parents' house had always been the place everyone gathered. At least, that's what I believed. Olivia sat quietly in the front passenger seat. She hadn't asked a single question since we'd left home. She was old enough to understand that adults sometimes smiled while their lives quietly fell apart. Mason kept asking if we were spending the night at Grandma's. "Just for a little while?" he asked. "I don't know yet, buddy." Noah hugged his stuffed dinosaur against his chest. "Grandpa always lets me watch cartoons in the basement." I smiled. "He does. Or at least, he used to." When I turned onto Maple Drive, my stomach tightened. Everything looked exactly the same. The white porch swing, the flower beds my mother planted every spring, the old oak tree where my brother and I had built a crooked treehouse that collapsed after 2 weeks. For a second, I almost felt relieved. This was home. Home was supposed to help. I parked in the driveway. Nobody came outside. I climbed out of the van, opened the sliding door. The kids climbed down one by one. Then I grabbed the only luggage we had managed to pack in a hurry. 1 black garbage bag. That image still stays with me. 3 children. 1 trash bag, and nowhere to belong. I knocked. A few seconds later, my father opened the door. His name was Daniel Harper. 65 years old, retired electrician, the man who taught me how to ride a bicycle, who sat beside my hospital bed when I had pneumonia at 12, who cried at my wedding. For one brief second, I saw my dad, then his expression changed. Not anger, not sadness, something worse. Discomfort, like he'd already rehearsed this conversation. "Hi, Dad." He glanced behind me. The kid smiled. "Grandpa." Noah reached both arms toward him. Normally, my father would have scooped him up immediately. Instead, he stayed exactly where he was. "I talked to your mother." The words came slowly. "Carefully. We don't think this is a good idea." I stared at him. "I just need a place for a few weeks." He looked away. "You should reconsider the divorce." "Dad?" "I'm serious. He cheated on me." He sighed heavily. "Marriage is complicated." "No." My voice surprised even me. "Cheating is uncomplicated." Silence. Olivia quietly stepped closer beside me. She slipped her hand into mine. She understood. Children always understand more than adults give them credit for. I squeezed her hand. "Dad, I have nowhere else tonight. You still have a home." I blinked. "What?" "You and Ethan need to work this out." I felt something inside me crack. The house isn't safe anymore. It could be. He moved another woman into our marriage. Dad rubbed his forehead. "I don't want to get involved." I almost laughed. He already was. Then footsteps echoed from the hallway. My younger brother. Brandon, 33 years old. Single, still living with our parents. He occupied nearly the entire finished basement. Gaming room, home office, private bathroom, the same basement my mother had claimed wasn't available. He leaned against the hallway wall wearing sweatpants and a hoodie. Smirking. There really isn't enough room, Abs. I stared at him. You have an entire floor. He shrugged. I've got my setup down there. His setup. Apparently, his computer deserved more space than his nieces and nephew. Behind me, Noah whispered, Mommy. I looked down. Why won't Grandpa let us in? I couldn't answer. Because I didn't know. Not really. Then my mother appeared, Linda Harper. She stood beside my father without touching him, like they'd practiced exactly where each person would stand. Oh, sweetheart, she began. I knew that tone. The one adults use, right before saying something. They think is reasonable but isn't. You need to think about your children. I looked behind me. My children are exactly why I'm here. They need stability. They need safety. They need both parents if possible. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They need a father who doesn't betray their mother. Mom folded her arms. People make mistakes. I swallowed hard. So you're saying I should teach Olivia that this is what marriage looks like? She hesitated. That's not what I meant. Then what exactly did you mean? She didn't answer. Right then, another familiar voice came from the staircase. Oh my gosh. My younger sister, Emily, 29, married less than 2 years, still floating through the honeymoon stage of life. She looked at me with obvious disappointment. I honestly think you're acting emotionally. Emotionally? Interesting choice of word. My husband cheated. I know. He lied for over a year. I know. So which part is emotional? She crossed her arms. You've got 3 kids. I noticed. Sometimes forgiveness matters more than pride. That sentence landed harder than anything else, because forgiveness was being demanded from exactly one person, me. Nobody was asking Ethan to earn it. Mason stepped closer. He tugged gently on my jacket. Mom, I'm hungry. That broke something inside me, not because he was hungry, because I'd spent the entire morning trying to protect them from exactly this moment. I bent down. We'll get something to eat soon. He nodded, completely trusting me, as children do. I stood back up, looked at every member of my family, then at the open doorway, the house where I'd spent 18 Christmas mornings, the house where I'd learned to walk, the house I believed would always be home. It wasn't. Not anymore. I picked up the garbage bag. Okay. That was all I said. Just one word. My father looked relieved. My mother looked uncomfortable. Emily looked convinced she'd been helpful. Brandon smiled. Then, my father quietly closed the front door. Not slammed, not aggressively. Just closed it, right in front of his grandchildren. As I walked back toward the van, Olivia looked up at me. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Mom. Yeah? Are we going to be okay? I looked at my 3 children, at everything we'd just lost. Then I smiled. Not because I believed it yet, because they needed me to. Yes, I promise. As I started the engine, I looked once in the rearview mirror at the house disappearing behind us, and silently made myself one promise. Watch what happens. That first night, we stayed in a roadside motel 30 miles outside the city. It wasn't dangerous. It wasn't nice either. The carpet smelled faintly of bleach. The air conditioner rattled every few minutes, and one of the bedside lamps only worked if you hit it twice. To my children, it felt like an adventure. Can we order pizza? Mason asked hopefully. I checked my bank account before answering. After paying for the room, I had just over $140 left until my next paycheck. We'll grab something from the grocery store instead. He smiled anyway. Can we still have popcorn? Absolutely. Sometimes children don't need perfect. They just need certainty. That night, after they finally fell asleep, I sat alone on the bathroom floor. The tiny room echoed every sound. I turned on the shower, not because I wanted one, but because I didn't want the kids to hear me cry. I let myself fall apart for exactly 15 minutes. Then I washed my face, looked into the mirror, and made a decision. Nobody was coming to rescue us. That wasn't tragedy. It was clarity. The next morning, I arrived at work 40 minutes early. My supervisor, Teresa Morgan, noticed immediately. Teresa wasn't warm. She wasn't the type who hugged people or baked cookies for birthdays. She believed in competence, which strangely enough made her kindness even more meaningful. She stepped into my office. Everything okay? I hesitated. No. She closed the door. Tell me. So I did. Not every detail. Just enough. The divorce. The motel. The kids. The fact that I wasn't sure where we'd be living next week. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded once. Can you work full-time? I blinked. What? The position next to yours has been vacant for 2 months. Yes. It comes with health insurance. I stared at her. And a salary increase. My eyes filled before I could stop them. I'm not offering charity, she said firmly. I'm offering someone reliable more responsibility. I nodded so fast I almost laughed. I'll take it. I figured you would. The following weeks became a blur. Work, school, lawyers, apartment searches, court paperwork, homework, laundry, packing lunches, trying to convince Noah that motel beds were actually vacation beds, trying to convince myself everything would somehow be okay. After 3 exhausting weeks, I found an apartment. 2 bedrooms, 2nd floor. An older brick building in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy. The kitchen cabinets had been painted so many times they barely closed. One window stuck every time it rained. The bathroom looked like it had survived several decades without changing its mind about anything. It was beautiful, because it was ours. The kids helped unpack. Olivia organized books before toys. Of course she did. Mason claimed the top bunk within 30 seconds. Noah insisted his stuffed dinosaur needed its own pillow. I laughed harder than I had in months. That weekend we bought curtains. Actually, Olivia picked them. Bright yellow, far brighter than I would have chosen. They make it look happy, she explained. She was right. Sometimes happiness begins with something as simple as curtains. The divorce moved slowly. Ethan hired an expensive attorney. Almost immediately, he asked for equal custody. On paper, it sounded reasonable. In reality, he barely knew the children's routines. He couldn't remember Noah's pediatrician, didn't know Mason's teacher's name, forgot Olivia's food allergy during mediation. My attorney quietly collected evidence. School attendance records, medical appointments, emergency contacts, daycare sign-in logs. Every document told the same story. I had been the parent. He had been nearby. The custody evaluator interviewed everyone, including Olivia. Afterward, she climbed into the car without saying a word. Halfway home, she finally spoke. Did I do something wrong? My heart broke. No, sweetheart. They asked who usually helps with homework. I know. I told the truth. You were supposed to. She looked out the window. I felt bad. I reached over and squeezed her hand. The truth doesn't become wrong just because someone doesn't like hearing it. She nodded quietly. I don't think she fully understood. But one day she would. 8 months after filing, the divorce was finalized. Primary physical custody. Every other weekend for Ethan. Retroactive child support. Medical expenses shared. Nothing extravagant, just fair. When I walked out of the courthouse, I didn't feel victorious. I felt lighter, like someone had quietly removed a backpack full of rocks I'd forgotten I was carrying. News traveled quickly through my family. Apparently, someone mentioned the settlement to my aunt. My aunt mentioned it to my mother. 2 days later, my phone rang. Abby? It was my mother. The first call in almost 9 months. We're so relieved everything worked out. I stood silently in my kitchen. Relieved. Interesting word. Finally, I answered. Are you? There was a pause. We've been worried. I looked around my apartment. The yellow curtains, the tiny dining table, the children's artwork taped to the refrigerator. You had every opportunity to help. Abby, no. I spoke gently. You don't get to watch someone drown, and later congratulate them for learning to swim. Silence. Long. Heavy. Finally, she whispered, We made mistakes. I closed my eyes. Yes, we'd really like to see the children. I looked toward the living room where all 3 kids were laughing over a board game. They're doing really well. I'm glad. So am I. Another silence. Then I quietly said, I need more time. When the call ended, I didn't cry. I simply realized something important. Some relationships don't end with anger. They end with understanding. And understanding is sometimes even more final. Life didn't change all at once. It changed quietly, one ordinary Tuesday at a time. One paycheck, one school pickup, one peaceful dinner. The chaos slowly gave way to routine. And routine became something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Teresa called me into her office. I assumed I'd forgotten to submit a report. Instead, she closed the door and smiled. I've recommended you for department lead. I stared at her. Me? You. I've only been full-time for a few months. You've been doing the job for months without the title. She slid a folder across the desk. Inside was the offer. The salary increase wasn't life-changing, but it was enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to stop calculating every grocery bill down to the last dollar. Enough to finally believe we weren't just surviving anymore. We were building. A month later, we moved again. Not across town, just into a slightly larger apartment in the same school district. 3 bedrooms, a tiny backyard. Every kitchen drawer actually opened. The bathroom still looked like it had been renovated, sometime during the late 1980s. But I didn't care. The first night there, the kids ran from room to room arguing over who had the biggest closet. Noah declared his room the coolest bedroom in America. Olivia rolled her eyes. Mason immediately asked if we could adopt a dog. Some things never change. That evening, after the moving boxes were stacked against the walls, Olivia quietly walked into the kitchen. She leaned against the counter while I stirred spaghetti sauce. She'd grown taller. Somehow, in the middle of all the chaos, I'd almost missed it. Mom? Yeah? I think we're going to be okay. I looked at her. She wasn't asking. She was telling me. I smiled. I think you're right. She nodded once and went back to unpacking her books. I stood there for another minute, stirring the same pot long after it needed stirring, because hearing those words from my daughter meant more than any court order ever could. Not everyone disappeared from my life. My younger sister Emily kept trying. Every few weeks another message arrived. At first they were cautious. I've been thinking about everything. Then longer. I realize I judged you too quickly. Eventually. Can we please just have coffee? I read every message. I answered none of them immediately. Months passed before I finally replied. Not with anger, just honesty. Emily, I appreciate that you're trying, but apologies don't erase moments. When I needed a sister, you gave me a lecture. When my children needed family, you chose comfort instead. Maybe one day we'll rebuild something. Today isn't that day. She answered almost instantly. I understand. For the first time. I believe she actually did. My father sent a Christmas card. No long letter. No explanation. Just 3 handwritten words. Thinking of you. I placed it on the refrigerator. Not for me. For the children. Because no matter how complicated adults become, they still deserve to know their grandfather. Love them in whatever way he was. Capable of showing it. My brother never reached out. Not once. Silence is an answer too. Sometimes it's the loudest one. Ethan settled into his new life. The relationship he'd destroyed our marriage for didn't survive very long. I heard through mutual friends that they broke up less than a year later. It didn't make me happy. It didn't make me sad. It simply reminded me of something. People who build relationships on betrayal eventually begin wondering who will betray whom next. Trust is difficult to grow in poisoned soil. We communicated only about the children. Pickup times. Doctor appointments. School events. Nothing more. One afternoon, after dropping the kids off, he lingered beside his car. You've changed. I looked at him. Have I? You seem... He searched for the word. Stronger. I smiled politely. No. I've always been strong. I just stopped wasting it. He didn't answer. He simply nodded. Then drove away. The biggest surprise came at Olivia's 5th grade family showcase. Parents wandered through classrooms looking at science projects, art displays, and history presentations. Olivia's project was titled The Science of Resilience. She'd spent weeks researching why some people recover from hardship while others remain trapped by it. At the bottom of her presentation board, she'd written one sentence in careful blue marker, not copied from a book, not quoted from a website, her own words. Strong people don't wait for someone to rescue them. They figure out the next step. I read it twice, then looked at her. You wrote this? She nodded proudly. I did. It's beautiful. She smiled. I learned it from watching you. For one terrifying second, I couldn't speak, because every sleepless night, every motel room, every tear I thought I'd hidden, hadn't gone unnoticed. She had been watching. Not my fear, my perseverance. That was the inheritance I was leaving my children. Not money, not property, not perfection. Proof that no matter how badly life knocks you down, you always take the next step, and then another, and another, until one day, you realize you've walked farther than you ever thought possible. People often imagine that healing arrives like a sunrise. Bright, obvious, life-changing. It doesn't. Healing looks more like Tuesday. It looks like packing school lunches without crying. It looks like paying your electric bill on time. It looks like laughing at your son's terrible, Jokes before realizing you haven't thought about your ex-husband all day. That's how it happened for us. One ordinary day at a time. Nearly a year after we moved into our new apartment, I finally had enough money to start a savings account. Nothing extraordinary, just a few $100s at first. But every payday I transferred a little more. Watching that number slowly grow gave me a strange kind of peace. Not because of the money, because it represented something I had never truly owned before. Security, the kind nobody could take away. One Saturday morning, Noah wandered into the kitchen while I was making pancakes. He climbed onto a stool and watched me flip one into the air. "I like this house better." I smiled. "Why?" He shrugged. "Nobody yells here." The spatula froze in my hand. Children remember things you pray they'll forget. I knelt beside him. "I'm glad you feel safe." He wrapped his tiny arms around my neck. "I always feel safe with you." That hug stayed with me for days. Mason started playing soccer that fall. During one game, he scored his first goal. He ran straight past the coach, past his teammates, past everyone else, right to me. He threw himself into my arms. "Did you see?" "I saw everything." "I knew you were watching." "Of course I was. I always would be." As for Ethan, he eventually stopped trying to explain the past. One afternoon, after dropping the kids off, he hesitated beside his car. "I owe you an apology." I looked at him. "You do?" "I'm sorry." He sounded sincere. Maybe for the first time in years, I believed he regretted losing us. But regret and repair are not the same thing. "Thank you," I said. That was enough. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes, it simply means refusing to carry someone else's mistakes any longer. Spring arrived. Then summer. Life became wonderfully ordinary. Homework, baseball games, birthday cakes, movie nights on the couch, laundry that never seemed to end. The little moments I used to overlook became the ones I treasured most. One evening, Olivia found an old photograph while helping me organize boxes. It showed all of us standing in front of my parents' house years earlier. Christmas lights, smiling faces, a family that looked unbreakable. She studied it quietly, then asked, "Do you miss them?" It wasn't an easy question. I thought carefully before answering. "I miss who I believed they were." She nodded slowly. "I think I understand." And somehow, I knew she did. About 16 months after everything happened, my mother called again. This time her voice sounded different. Smaller. "Abby." "Hi, Mom." "I've been thinking about that day." I waited. We were wrong. The words surprised me, not because I'd never expected to hear them, because I'd stopped needing them. She continued. "I should have opened the door." "Yes. I'll regret that for the rest of my life." I closed my eyes. There it was. The apology I'd once dreamed about. The one I thought would heal everything. Strangely, it didn't, because healing had already happened without it. "I appreciate you saying that." Silence settled between us. Finally, she whispered, "Will you ever forgive us?" I looked out the kitchen window. Olivia was helping Noah learn to ride his bike. Mason was chasing them with a soccer ball. The evening sun covered everything in gold. "I already have." She began crying softly. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. No, it doesn't. We spoke for another few minutes. Slowly, carefully, not as though everything had been fixed. Because it hadn't. Some bridges aren't rebuilt overnight. Sometimes they become footpaths instead. And sometimes, that's enough. A few weeks later, I agreed to meet my parents at a small park. Neutral ground. The children ran ahead toward the playground. My father sat beside me on a bench for a long time without speaking. Finally, he said, "I failed you." Simple, direct, honest. I looked at the man who had once closed the door in my face. He looked older now. Not weaker, just aware. "You did." "I thought I was protecting the family." "You protected comfort." He nodded slowly. "I know." That conversation didn't erase the past, but it allowed the future to exist. Sometimes that's the best ending life offers. Not perfection, just truth. Looking back now, people sometimes tell me how strong I was. They're wrong. I wasn't strong every day. Some days I was terrified. Some days I wanted to quit. Some days I cried in grocery store, parking lots because I couldn't remember if I had enough money for cereal and milk. Strength wasn't what carried me. Love did. Love for 3 little people who never stopped believing I could fix impossible things. And maybe, in the end, I did. Not by saving the life we lost, but by building a better one. If you're listening to this while standing in front of your own closed door, wondering what comes next, Please hear me. The people who refuse to make room for you are not deciding your future. They're only removing themselves from it. Sometimes the greatest gift life gives you is discovering exactly who will stand beside you when everything falls apart. And sometimes that person turns out to be you. If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after someone you trusted let you down? Share your story in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories about resilience, family, betrayal, and second chances. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, the strongest homes are not always the ones you inherit. Sometimes they're the ones you build yourself.